Well, we're joined now by the commentator and lecturer Roland Henwood from the Department of Political Sciences at the University of Pretoria. Roland, good evening to you, and thank you very much indeed for your time. When we have Russian missiles being launched in civilian areas after this apparent Ukrainian attack on this bridge, does this suggest that this is no longer a rational conflict, that people are lashing out at each other?
Good afternoon, Stephen. Yes, I think one can make that argument. It also is in line with what seems to be a different strategy from Russia. We've seen changes in the leadership directing the war, and one of the persons that have been indicated as the new commander of the war effort is known for these kinds of strategies. That is what was followed in Syria and also in Chechnya. So this seems to be the strategy, and that is to target civilians and civilian areas to inflict as much direct and psychological damage as possible.
What's this going to do in Ukraine? I mean, I can't see, it'll go up and down a little bit, but is it really going to sort of weaken Russia, or will it strengthen the resolve of Ukrainians, as it has in other bombing campaigns in history?
It is probably going to strengthen the resolve of the Ukrainians, at least in the short term. What happens in the long term is more difficult to assess and depends on what exactly the Russian plan is going to be and how far they are willing to go. The big threat of this is that it may escalate the war. It may escalate the deployment of certain types of weapons. It may escalate the geographical area. Ukrainians may feel under pressure to actually go beyond where they've gone up to now. They've contained themselves into the territory of Ukraine and historical territory of Ukraine. This may actually be something that forces them to go outside of that and inflict some form of punishment and pain on Russia. And that is a serious issue, because that may really escalate the war and take it where especially NATO and the US does not want to go.
Well, this is where it starts to get very complicated. If you're Ukraine and you have your civilians being killed by Russia, there'll be pressure on you in a democracy to actually, have some sort of bomb go off in Moscow. What happens then?
Well, that's the issue, and we know that the Ukrainians have been under strict orders and also limited in terms of the weapon systems they receive that curtail that kind of option. But you may find it going underground and not using external weapons, but using sabotage, etc. And the idea may be just to symbolize, to send a message and basically be a symbol of what Ukraine can do and warn Russia. And that, in a sense, is what the attack on the bridge has done. It is a bridge that is linked personally to Putin. It is historically the geographical area of Ukraine, and the attack and destruction of part of the bridge seems to have hit a very sore spot in Putin and in Russia, in Moscow. It immediately led to serious criticism of Putin, hence his retaliatory measures, which are unacceptable. There's no sense of a retaliation that is commensurate with what was done. And of course, the fact that you attack civilians directly, that is an act of war that is unacceptable, it's illegal. So the pressure is building on everyone, and therein lies the risk of what may happen, well, fairly soon if things get out of hand.
As I understand it, Germany has said it will try and give Ukraine technology that would stop these missiles. we'll all remember the Gulf War and the American Patriot missiles that were supposed to stop Scud missiles. But Russian missiles are not Iraqi Scud missiles. They're something else. Is it really possible for the West to do that? And once again, as you point out, Russia will respond to that too.
Yes, it is possible to provide more protection. But with more protection comes more risks, in the sense that you are continuously escalating. And if Putin comes under more and more pressure, no one knows what he's really willing to do. And especially with the new leadership that he has, that have shown that there is no brakes on what they will do, that is something that has to be considered very carefully. So the technology exists. It's not 100% fail-safe, but it will increase the sense of safety. It will be successful in some areas. The other dimension, of course, is how far can Russia go on its own. Indications are that they do not have stockpiles of modern missiles like what they've used now. There's limited access. They can't replace them as quickly as they would have been under normal circumstances. So it may also be a play for time on both sides to see how far they can go and then what's going to happen. So there are many unknowns, but the underlying issue is an increased risk of an escalation in the conflict and the continuous threats coming from Putin that he may use nuclear missiles, theater weapons. I don't think one must jump to conclusions, but it is something to be taken seriously. Right. Maybe another dimension also that it seems that Putin wants to increase the theater of war by drawing Belarus into it directly, and Ukraine is quite sensitive to that. They've called for measures to prevent that because that's going to stretch their abilities, and again, it increases the scope of the war.
Roland Henwood, thank you so much. A commentator at the University of Pretoria. So much going on in that conflict.